How you doing? We're in chapter 3 of volume 2, and we're talking about removing solids from the secondary effluent. So if you have a clarifier or a trickling filter, maybe you're using activated sludge, but any time before we send our solids to the creek, typically we'll have some sort of tertiary or final removal of solids. At my plant, what we have is disc filters. They are filter media they kind of act as a rotating biological contactor, but in terms of the spinning of the media, and as the flow goes in through the middle, there are pie plates that are, we'll say, of a fabrics type substance, and the solids will adhere to that fabric substance. And as the filter media spins, there are power washers off driven off of a pump that backwash any of the solids that are collected on that media as it goes around, and as the influent, well, the effluent from the clarifier, but the influent of the disc filter, and then those get backwashed to a trough, and the clear water then goes out to UV disinfection. But you can see on page 155, there are tons of ways that we can treat the final solids, whatever solids we have left. With a clarifier, you're not going to get 100% removal of all your solids. As much as operators as we'd like, you could have pin flock, you could have sludge bulking, any kind of those types of clarifier inefficiencies can happen. And so, on page 155, we have several different ways that we can do. We can do physical chemical methods, so your coagulation, your flocculation, your sedimentation. You can do conditioning. I think that's more towards sludge conditioning, if I'm not mistaken. But there's gravity filtration, pressure filtration, membrane filtration, and biological aerated filters. You know, um, you say, well, this is a wastewater class. Why are we learning about water? Some of the concepts that we use, like I said before, I worked at a water treatment plant, and it's funny because we use some of the same core pieces of equipment on the wastewater side to remove the solids as we do on the water side. On the water side, we are adding potassium and trying to take out the iron and manganese, and do that by your gravity filters and your pressure filters. So coagulation, we've talked about this before, but it's the clumping together of very fine particles into larger particles caused by the use of chemicals. The chemicals neutralize the electrical charges of the fine particles, allowing them to come closer and form larger clumps. This clumping together makes it easier to separate the solids from the water by settling, skimming, draining, and filtering. Flocculation is the gathering of fine particles after coagulation to form large particles by the process of gentle mixing. This clump together makes it easier to separate the solids from the water by settling, skimming, draining, and filtering. Sedimentation is the process of settling the deposited of suspended matter carried by water and wastewater. So when we talk about coagulants are chemicals that are added to the wastewater rapidly. The role of these coagulants is to destabilize the suspended particles so that they can collide, stick together, and flocculate into larger. The whole thing about coagulation and flocculation is we're trying to destabilize any kind of suspended solids that are in our clarifier or in our effluent going to the river. We want to destabilize them, make them into bigger particles and then settle them out or filter them out. Obviously, the concept is not um, foreign. If you took a glass outside and you took 3 tablespoons of dirt and you threw it into the water and you mixed it up, somehow we have to get that dirt back out. Now, how do we get that dirt back out? Well, we can either use some sort of filter or we can use a chemical method by using a coagulant to make those to destabilize that dirt, and then we want to flocculate it to get to a bigger mass so that our filter um, can actually take that out, or that it would settle back down again. Gravity is our friend. That's why, as little kids, you take a milk jug and you would get something out of the creek and it would be dirty, but then after 30 minutes, it would settle and it looked clear. So, gravity is our friend. You know, Chemistry is our also our friend. On page 159, coagulation. It increases the tendencies for very small particles to stick together. And then once again, flocculation then collects the small particles together, forming a flock that can be separated using sedimentation or filtration. Um, you know, we talk about chemical coagulants available commercially. Uh, They can be formulated with negative or positive, chaotic or neutral electro surface charges. So, I've had test questions, but aonic is obviously negative, chaotic is positive. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to disrupt um, their charge so that we can obviously get them to settle out or um, filter out. 161. Metal salts. Aluminum sulfite and ferric chloride are examples of metal coagulants commonly used to remove suspended salt particles from wastewater. These coagulants are widely used because they are readily available, inexpensive, and effective over a pH range found in municipal wastewater. And then it lists some of those coagulants. On page 162, both dry and liquid forms of alum are irritating to skin, mucous membranes, and can cause serious injury. Protective clothing, uh, other forms of personal protective PPE are needed to prevent exposure from dust, splashes, sprays, and it talks about respiratory equipment. Um, you know, we want to protect ourselves. So liquid usually comes in either, when we talk about our polymers, they'll come as a dry mass or they'll come as a liquid and you use a liquid pump. If they come in a dry mass, you will have some sort of feeding system, or perhaps you'll take that dry mass and convert it then into a liquid by adding liquid to it. And just whatever economies of scale and how your polymer shows up. But it's important that we protect ourselves. As a water or wastewater operator, we probably have 30, maybe 35 years of working in the industry. So, let's protect ourselves with the chemicals that we're using. Um, we can use on page 165 hydrated lime is used to coagulate solids or adjust the pH. We've looked at that in the past with phosphorus removal. But lime can be purchased in 50 or 100-pound bags or in bulk trucks. Quicklime Lime also must be purchased as anhydrous or quicklime, but must be slaked before it can be used. Quicklime is more difficult to store because it easily absorbs moisture and can cake in a solid clump. Quicklime is less expensive though, but the added equipment for slaking and increased uh, operation safety requirements must be considered. So when we talk about slaking quicklime, we're talking about to mix with water so that a true chemical combination can take place. So maybe you slake your lime at your facility. But once again, we need to be careful of that, and it is less expensive. Jar testing and coagulation selection. On bottom of 166, you may have several jars. What we do with jar testing is we'll maybe have a series of jars. We add several different coagulants to it, and we basically see how the efficiency of those coagulants are. Is it settling out our product? And so, we have a jar test, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's the way it's going to act in our selectors or tanks or clarifiers, but it's a good indication. Perhaps in our jar test, we might dose one jar with 2 milliliters of a polymer. The next one we would do four, and the next one we would do six. And really, what we're trying to see is what is the best for our plant for the least amount of money. Obviously, you can overdose, and we don't want to do that as operators because that's wasteful to the taxpayers. But a jar test is, what it sounds like. It's adding a polymer or coagulant to a jar and watching how the water and the turbidity how it settles out. What kind of results are we getting? Um, on on page 163, you can see a mixing funnel, a water meter, a known concentration, a day tank, and a chemical feed flow pace. Typically the EPA likes us to only make up what can be um, discharged in one day. So if you have a chemical pump and you're making a solution of polymer, we want a day tank. And the reason why we don't store more than a day tank um, is because what happens if the chemical pump overfeeds? There's nothing worse for an operator for them to come in and a pump is stuck on full auto and it's just been pumping, pumping, pumping. And let's say you're into a tank that maybe has a month's worth supply and you just pump that into your system. Very hard to get that out. You might have to notify the EPA. So it's important to have a day tank in some way to mix that up. On page 174, you have your typical lime feeding system. You have your bulk storage bin. Once again, you have your dust collector. So there's multiple different ways of being able to get the system of liquids into the injection point. On page 180, we talk about chemical pumps. Up to the top, there's an LMI. That's your typical diaphragm pump. And on the back, there's a diaphragm. And as the liquid comes in, it pops. Liquid comes in, it pops. Liquid comes in, pops. And that's how those work. Um, they have their advantages for certain applications. A peristaltic pump, which you can see, I think that's on 181 is a peristaltic pump. It goes around and it has a tube, and as the roller rolls the tube, it pumps the liquid in. when I first started, we had a lot of those LMI pumps or diaphragm pumps. They have a tendency to get airlocked. So if there's an air bubble some in your day tank, they can get airlocked in that diaphragm. Peristaltic pumps tend to not lose prime and not get airlocked. Me personally, and this is just me as an operator, I've become I I, I like peristaltic better. It's a preference thing, but I've found that the reliability of the peristaltic pumps are pretty good as long as you keep the maintenance up on the sacrificial tube that is pumping the system. Um, keep going here. Sedimentation banks. We've looked at sedimentation banks. They can be rectangular. They can also be a clarifier. I've talked about clarifiers a lot in this channel, but the influent comes in through the feed well there on page 189. The sludge settles to the bottom. That sludge, as it settles to the bottom, as that clarifier spins, will push the sludge to the bottom hopper and then be removed. Up the top is a scum removal because with sedimentation, you'll have some that will go to the top and obviously some that will go to the bottom. You have your wear overflow rate, your surface loading rate, all those other clarifier efficiency, your solids going in, um, you know, your solids going out, and then, your percentage of removal. One thing I will mention, on 203 is just polymers. They're very slippery if they're ever spilled on concrete. There's a certain way that you need to, clean those out, but just something to mention. On 204, we talk about thermal conditioning. We use on thermal conditioning, they use pressure and heat to condition the sludge. Wastewater sludges and biological sludges in particular may have large quantities of bound water associated with them. Uh, so it says subjecting these sludge particles to extreme heat at elevated pressure hydrolyzes, decomposes the surrounding sheath and bursts the cell water, allowing the bound water to escape. I have never seen thermal conditioning, but it is important to know that you can run that in a continuous or batch state. So continuous is going all the time. A batch is like a batch of cookies. So it does a set amount and then discharges. Set amount and then discharges. Continuously, it just continually discharges. So you want to know the difference between batch and continuous sludge. Going through I always have trouble saying this word. Eutration on 211 is basically the washing process that may not actually improve the dewatering characteristics of the digested sludge, but reduces chemical conditioning requirements. So you have sludge, and from my understanding, you run effluent through it, and it says, however, as much as 50% of the digested solids may be lost to the plant effluent with eutration effluent. The loss of these fine solids into the plant effluent will lower the effluent quality while recycling to the plant headworks generally results in operation problems. So you can wash that sludge, but you got to do something with the wash water. If you send it out to the creek, well, obviously your effluent's going to decrease. You may improve your sludge, but if you send it back to the headworks, you're going to have problems there. So when we're talking about gravity filters, you know, just think of like a big swimming pool, like on 215, and you have, your fine sand or your coal and your, rock at the bottom. And as the water comes in, the gravity of just the water will push its way down through the filter media bed, and any kind of particulates will be trapped on that fine sand or coal. And when those finally get clogged enough that the water will no longer protrude through the sand, or it breaks through the sand in the bottom layer and you start clogging your coarse layer on page 215, it's time to backwash. As your head loss gets as an indicator, you need to backwash. And so what we do is we reverse the water. Um, in that releases those solids that are trapped on the sand filter, and then goes to ultimately disposal, um, either back to the head of the plant or somewhere else into the treatment process. But gravity filters are just one other option that you can use at your plant. You know, Filtration is something that has been known for years and decades. Obviously, um, anytime you have sand or coal, as the water, goes through there at some rate, you're going to get a better quality effluent or whatever water that you're going to discharge to the creek. And that water can be upflow or downflow. They have upflow filters and conventional downflow filters. And once again, we use these. Um, we use these at water plants. Um, you know, on page 217 is a good picture of a differential pressure through a sand filter. The water goes to the coarse media, then the fine media, and then goes to the under drain. Another um, another thing we want to talk about is pressure filters. Let me find a good example of pressure filters. So inner media pressure filters. So pressure filters are built in terms of the insides the same as a gravity filter. We have the sand and the rock. The only difference is we're actually putting pressure on that. So it's a closed unit. So gravity filter is an open unit, meaning the water is rushing in from the top. Pressure is inside of an enclosed um, unit. So if you want to think of a pressure filter, think of like your filter that goes in your refrigerator. That's a pressure filter. A gravity filter is if you had a 5-gallon bucket and it was filled with sand on the top and then gravel on the bottom. And you would just pour in water over the sand and it would come out the bottom of the hole of the bucket. Little tidbit information, you know, in third world countries, they are actually developing these buckets, those 5-gallon buckets, so that they can provide safe drinking water to people in third world countries. Just an interesting concept that they have. Um, they're using it as a filter, but they're also using in the third world countries as the water is going through it. It takes 2 weeks for it to ripen because they're actually using it kind of as a trickling filter also to remove the biological activities going on in there. Polymers on page 235. Polymers cause suspended materials to stick together by chemical bridging or chemical enmeshment when contact is made with the filter influent. Aonic, which are negative, are the most commonly used with the application of alum, but performances vary. We'll try to find a good picture. Okay, on 241 is a good picture of a pressure filter. So that is your standard pressure filter. And once again, that has to be backwashed. And so what happens is you reverse the flow in the pressure filter and you backwash it for a series of time. And then once you backwash it, then you have to rebed the system, which means that because all that sand and coal has been lifted up, you have to rebed the system. Um, but that's a horizontal. Water plant I used to work in was vertical, which you can see a vertical on page 242. But all whether they're gravity filters or pressure filters, all filters must be backwashed, and you have to backwash them at a certain volume. So many GPM to be able to remove the solids from the system, but you don't want to increase. Let's say you need to backwash at 800 GPM and you actually backwash at 1500 GPM, gallons per minute. Well, what you're going to do is you're going to disrupt your filter bed and ruin your filter bed. So backwashing at the proper uh, rate and then doing it in a manner that for the correct length of time is also important. I'm gonna keep moving. This is a big chapter. Not gonna lie. Membrane filtration. So yes, we do use membrane filtration in the um, wastewater industry. It says microfiltration are less commonly used with wastewater treatment because of the resulting permeate is generally unacceptable for discharge. It says ultrafiltration is most commonly used membrane based wastewater treatment. So, you have your different levels of pore size in your membrane, and ultra is not as tightly wound, so it's going to allow some things like smaller particles, pore such as water, alcohol, salts, and sugars to pass through the membrane, but it's going to um, catch suspended solids. Reverse osmosis, that's where we kind of use that in a plants or water plant setting. It has the tightest wound, and so it's going to reject more. But obviously, in the wastewater system, we're not, well, depending on where we're at, um, you know, we can get away with ultrafiltration. So, membrane filtration, you can see on 272 and 273, you have racks of membrane, and in those racks are individually um, membranes. So in one of those racks, maybe seven membranes, five membranes tied together in one of those racks. Um, and then we also have the submerged. So on 275, you have your submerged membranes. The thing about submerged, and which we should talk about more, is they'll actually submerge membranes in aeration tanks. And the reason why is you can carry a higher mixed liquor suspended solids than you could typically carry in a standard aeration tank because you're not using a clarifier at that point to do the solid separation. You're using You're using the membrane to actually take the water out. You know, a spiral membrane, these are not submersed, but spiral membranes are the ones you'll see in a rack. You can see the feed solution comes into the middle. You have your concentrate, which is your reject, and then in the middle, the permeate. So as the water comes in and is forced through that water will percolate down into the middle of this section of pipe, and then the concentrate will keep getting pushed out until the final stage, and that concentrate will actually get rejected. We use that in a water system and wastewater system for TDS removal if we're using reverse osmosis. Um, Once again on 281, we have an EQ tank and a noxic tank, but then we added the membrane in there. So we have the noxic aeration membrane. You know, we can do a lot of things there, but you can see how in 281 that we've eliminated the secondary clarifier by adding the membrane. Once again, it's just a different way to skin the same cat. But periodically, those membranes get fouled. And so when the membranes get fouled, we have to use some sort of cleaning solution. So if it gets fouled with, uh, you know, TDS or hardness, mineral fouling, then we need to use an acid. If it's biological fouling, we need to use a caustic or a basic cleaning solution. And they make special cleaning solutions that you can buy. Um, there's all different types of salesmen out there, so you can buy whatever you want. Um, that really is all we're going to cover for tonight. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll talk to you later.